This is Your Kick-Ass Life podcast, episode number 109 with guest Katie Dalebout. All links and resources you hear on this podcast can be found by going to yourkickasslife.com/109.
This is the Your Kick-Ass Life podcast with Andrea Owen, a no BS guide to self-help and badassery. Because ladies, let's face it, life's too short for it to not kick ass. And here's your host, the girl who serves it up straight with a side of crazy, Andrea Owen.
Ass kickers, how are you? As always, I am so glad that you are here, ready to listen to another podcast episode. And every time I start to record these episodes, I just get overwhelmed with gratitude that you're here. So thank you. Thank you to all of you who have left reviews in iTunes. That means the world to me, reading those and just knowing that you're listening and knowing that you are gaining tools and walking away with aha moments and takeaways. Oh, I can't even. I mean, that's why I do this. That's absolutely why I do this, is to be in service to you. And thank you for those of you that share the podcast. I see some of you tagging your friends on Instagram and Facebook and telling your friends about it. And thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I wanted just to give you a quick reminder before we jump into today's guest. If you haven't received it yet, I have a offer for you that is absolutely free. It costs $0. It is an ebook that I wrote and an accompanying, that's a hard word to say, accompanying. I think I'm saying it right. At any rate, it's an ebook and an audio, and it's free, and it's called How the Shit Talking in Your Head is Making You Crazy and 3 Ways to Change It. Very easy. If you're on your phone right now, all you have to do is text the word kick ass, make that all one word, to 444-999. The word kick ass to 444-999. They will ask for your email address. And by they, I mean me. You know, I'm not going to give your email address to third. Who does that? Do people still do that? I think they do, because I'll sign up for something and get emails and it's so frustrating. Anyway, I digress. I will not do that. So I will send you the ebook and audio that goes with it. And it's really awesome because it's 3 concrete tools that you can take now and implement in your life to help you with your inner critic, because you know how much I love to talk about the inner critic, and you know how much I love to teach you all to manage that shit talker in your head. So I always say we can't get rid of it, but we can certainly manage it and transform it into something that sounds like self-kindness and self-compassion instead of self-criticism. So that is the word kick-ass to 444-999. Get that sent over to you pronto. And so let's move on to today's guest. So excited to tell you about the topic that we're going to talk about. Oh, and we are going to give away a book. So Katie Dalebout, I'm going to tell you about Katie in just a minute, and obviously then into the interview with her, but there's a giveaway. So Katie has generously offered to give away a book to one of my listeners. So all you have to do to be in the running to win a copy of the book is come on over to either my Facebook page or my Instagram account. Both of those can be found at Your Kick-Ass Life. And it's facebook.com/yourkickasslife or instagram.com/yourkickasslife. Find the image where you'll see this podcast and leave us a comment about what was your biggest takeaway from this interview. What was your biggest takeaway about journaling, which is what we're going to be talking about? This contest will go from today, when this is released, July 27th, through Wednesday, August 3rd, 2016. So from any time during those dates, come on over to either Facebook or Instagram on my page, find the image where we are promoting this episode, and tell us your biggest takeaway. And a winner will be picked at random on August 3rd, and we'll let you know who is the lucky winner of Katie's book. So let me tell you a little bit about Katie. Katie Dalebout curates inspired wisdom for women through her writings, podcasts, videos, workshops, and coachings. She believes every woman deserves happiness and guides them to discover their unique version of a holistic wellness wonderland that leads to everyday joy. Katie knows that beyond the physical body lie inquisitive souls who want to experience all that life has to offer. It is evident Katie brings her personal journey and her passion to guide and share with others to every medium she puts her attention and creative inspiration. Katie's a contributor to Refinery 29, Mind Body Green, and has been featured in Teen Vogue, Yahoo Health, and the Daily Mail. In 2013, she launched a weekly interview podcast, Wellness Wonderland Radio, which attracted wellness and lifestyle celebrities such as Gabrielle, Bernstein, Stiles, and Joe Cross. She believes exploring creativity is the gateway to developing a positive body image and true holistic wellness. Her first book, Let It Out, A Journey Through Journaling, is a collection of journaling tools to help people get to know themselves beyond their physicality. So without further ado, here is Katie. Ass Kickers, we are here and we are live with another episode of the podcast. I'm here with Katie Dalebout.
Yay! I'm so happy to be here. I'm so excited to hang out with you and all the ass kickers. I love that.
It's so funny. So this morning, I don't know what time it was, probably around 6, maybe just before 6, I was dreaming about this interview, which is like kind of creepy for
Oh, I love it.
I woke up thinking about journaling and thinking about talking to you and kind of like, you know, playing the conversation in my mind. And then I fully came to and I was like, that was weird. I've never dreamt about a guest before I've had them on. So that's a first. Congratulations.
Cool. Thank you. I feel super honored.
Kind of creepy. But no, I'm excited to have you here because journaling is one of those things that I've never specifically talked about with anyone in all these episodes. So I'm excited to talk about that. And you have a new book out. And I know how exciting that is, having had one myself. And so congratulations on that, first and foremost.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much. We were talking before this about the whole process of it, and it was just so nice to talk to someone who understands it and gets it. And yeah, it was great. So thank you.
Yeah, and what we were talking about earlier, I just mentioned it really quick for people who, because I know a lot of people listening have probably thought about writing a book or even thinking of some endeavor that's just as big, whether it's a creative endeavor or a personal or a professional one. And it's that feeling of like, oh my God, you know, my friend Joe Casey says new level, new devil. And it's so true. So if that's you and you are dragging your feet on it, my one piece of advice that I want to say before we jump into the interview is get support. And by that, I mean someone that like you can call and be like, I'm so scared to do this. Can you hold my hand through it and, you know, drag me along the way?
Yeah, totally. I need a lot of support around me 24/7.
It takes a village.
Yes, it really does. So much.
All right. Well, then let's jump in. So tell us, like, first and foremost, I want to know what your personal experience with journaling was that led you to write an entire book about it.
Yeah, it's funny. I was doing an event yesterday here for the book, and someone was talking about they were so excited that they were there because they were like, I've been journaling since I was 7 years old, and I always keep diaries and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, I've never did that. Like, I just was not someone who journaled when I was a kid or a teenager. I wish that I did. It probably would have helped me a lot, but I just was never someone that did that. And even in college, I never really journaled. And at the very end of college, I was going through something that I know, Andrea, you can relate to. I was healing an eating disorder. So I was surrounded by mentors and coaches and therapists and lots of support around me, almost smothering me. And I felt very much alone, even though I was surrounded by people. And I had a gift card. I remember this very clearly, to a bookstore. And I was like going around in the self-help section. And then I was just like, ugh, I've like done all of this. I've read all of this. What do I even do? And I like ran over to the stationery section, or I just looked over there, and I remember seeing this color-filled journal, and I was like, I'm going to buy that and I'm going to write in it. And nobody told me to do it. I don't know where I got this idea that it would be helpful to me, and I didn't even know if it would be, but I bought this journal with my gift card. So it was basically free. And then I spent that summer outside just sitting and writing about how I was feeling and being really raw and real for the first time ever. I was unfiltered, and I was writing out how I was actually feeling. I was getting to know myself, and I was just letting it out in this journal, and it felt cathartic to me. I didn't know why. at the time at all, but I just kept doing it because it made me feel validated in some way. It made me feel seen in some way, even though I was just, seeing myself for the first time. And I was able to get, as you know, we have so many thoughts in our mind. We have limiting beliefs up there. We have like stuff we picked up from childhood, stuff that we picked up from other people. And we really need to sort through, what we want to listen to and what we want to use to create our reality and what is just old stuff holding us back. And so I didn't know that at the time, but that's what I was doing. I was getting it out of my head onto the page, and by it being a journal that I knew no one was going to read and that I knew I was safe writing in, I was completely, like I said before, unfiltered, raw, real, even to a level that was different than with someone safe, like a friend or a mentor or therapist. Because I think, I'll speak for myself, there's always a little bit of filtering that happens.
A little, I call it always a little tiny bit of bullshitting.
Yeah. And I think I maybe have it more than some people, and people probably can relate to this as people pleasers. I want my therapist to like me. I know that's not the point, but that's how I was feeling in all of this. And I think with an eating disorder too, I've thought about this a lot lately. You are kind of lying, you're kind of putting on this front all the time to the world. I'm okay. I've got this under control, when you might not. And so I was very comfortable with lying to myself and other people. And so this journal allowed me to be real for the first time in a long time, at least. And it wasn't just that it was cathartic just, writing it out. It allowed me to become eventually more real in my relationships and in my therapy and get deeper. And because I was, letting out this unfiltered version, sorting through that, and then I could, go deeper with someone else. And so I just felt this relief after I started doing it. And yeah, I can go on from there and how it became a book, but that's kind of how I found it.
That's so interesting. And I love that you brought up the topic around how even the most vulnerable of us, even the people that are, seemingly really authentic. I'm talking about myself, by the way, if anybody is wondering who I'm talking about. I have this friend. No, no, but I do. I think I consider myself a very real person. I tell my listeners, they know everything about me, except the color of my underwear, which I'd be happy to tell them. But yeah, I think
same. I think we're a lot alike in that.
And that's been a process. I haven't always been like that, but I still think, this was just recently I was talking to my best friend Amy, Amy Smith.
Love her. And I love both of you. You guys are the coolest.
Oh, thank you. I'm actually really uncool in real life, Katie. No, sorry to burst your bubble.
I don't believe that for a second.
There was an episode that came out a few weeks ago about how I made such an ass hat of myself at the Rob Bell event in North Carolina. You guys, if anyone has not listened to that episode, please go.
Oh, I'm going to go back and listen to it.
Yeah, I forget which episode it is. I'll tell you in a second. I think it was 96 or 97. Oh, God, it was bad. All right. But I think that I was telling Amy, and Amy's been the first best friend that I've had where I can bring anything to her and she wouldn't judge me. I know in my heart that anything and she wouldn't judge me. However, I can know this logically, but there's still that primal part, the old brain in me who is no. She's still probably going to think you're crazy and reject you and not love you and leave you. Because, a lot of people in my life had. You get to be, I know you're a lot younger than me, but you get to be a certain age and you probably have your heart broken by now. And I think that that's deep and that goes really deep. And so my point is that yeah, I think that there's still these stories that we have or these situations that we don't want to get in where if we behave this way or if we tell this person this thing, for me, I was terrified to completely fall apart in front of her. I'm terrified to completely fall apart in front of anybody. But I think that when you journal it, I have old journals where I was writing in all caps so huge, it would just be barely a sentence on one page. And it just the emotion and the tears on the page, that for me also was the place where I could totally just unleash and pray to God nobody ever found it.
Yeah, it's really interesting how I was feeling that way a couple months ago, many months ago. I was feeling that same way. I have so many friends, so many people in person and a lot around the world that I don't get to see on a daily basis that I talk to frequently, and I feel close with them and I know things about them and they know things about me. but I'd never really, since our relationships had begun, I'd never really had something vulnerable or really intense that I needed to share before, or not even like that intense, just like vulnerable. And I just hadn't like taken it to that level yet. And so I was really like, who do I turn to? How does this work? Like, I just hadn't had something like that yet. And so then I was kind of like, wow, I have all these people, but like, who can I be really real with? And I think it's really important to not only like have the friends that you feel like you can be real with, but take that chance on someone and be real with them and show them your vulnerability, which I know we both are like huge fans of Brene Brown's work. So we know that how, important that is and crucial that is, but it gives someone else the ability to be there for you. And it brings you guys so much closer. So I think, using your journal can kind of be a way to be the training wheels for that. I find that when I process something first by myself in my journal, it might start off really dark and really all caps. But then if I keep going, a lot of times I start to self-soothe, and I don't even try to. I start to self-coach myself, where it's something like, today was horrible, but tomorrow was better, and like, that's like very simplistic, but it'll kind of start to self-soothe. And then that way, when I do have a conversation with a friend, I can come to it from a little bit more of a, not a healed place per se, but a process and like more self-aware, so I can even get more help from them than I would have if it was just more chaotic when I brought them the initial situation.
So, I mean, you kind of alluded to it a few minutes ago, but I wanted to specifically ask you, why have you found that journaling is such an effective tool in personal development in general, but also like in something that everybody wants, like finding happiness?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing about it that has helped me so far is the self-awareness piece. I think especially, in our 20s or 30s or whatever age you are, but I think especially, when you're trying to figure out who you are, which I assume happens every decade, it's really important to take that inventory of, people might ask you how you're feeling, but how many times do you really like ask yourself and get honest with yourself? And I had been putting on so many masks in my entire life, throughout my teens and college, in my early 20s. Like, I had just been wearing all of these masks all the time, and I didn't really know who I was beyond that. And journaling allowed me to figure out, what do I even like? Who am I even? And what do I even want in the world? It allowed me to have that freedom to list out my desires and list out my emotions. And that clarity has helped me so much to find happiness, because I think without that direction, without putting something in your GPS for how you want to feel, you're never going to really get there, because you don't even know where you're going, or you might just be driving in circles. And so I think the self-awareness piece is huge. And then being okay with the shadow sides of yourself, the parts of you that, you have shame or guilt or fear about, and you're afraid to tell other people. I think it's important to get that out of your head and onto the page. And then from there, you can sort through like, okay, maybe I don't feel safe enough to tell this to anyone yet, but at least I can see it right here. And maybe it's not that bad. And maybe I can do this to help it. Or maybe I can share it with someone now. And it just is helpful. So that's kind of the biggest way that it's helped me, is just the self-awareness alone.
I think that's huge. I totally agree with you. And for me, I've been an inconsistent journaler. I'll admit it. And it's funny, I still have my diary from when I was, I think I was like in second or third grade. It was a Hello Kitty diary.
Aww.
And I wrote about my friends, and I wrote about who I skated with at the Aquarius roller skating rink. And I was mad at my parents because they wouldn't, oh my God, it's hilarious. My mom didn't want to watch my puppet show. And as a grown up, I'm like, that is so my mom. Just hilarious things like that. And then I journaled all throughout my childhood and into my teens and a little bit in my 20s, usually when I was just like raging. And then I stopped for a really long time and then picked it back up again when I was probably about 30 or 31, really like when my whole life fell apart. It really underlines your talking about that self-awareness piece, is that when I would journal, I would go back and read what I wrote. And sometimes I would go back and read it like right after I wrote it. And other times it was like a day or two or longer later. And So many times I would read what I wrote and it would sort of be reiterating what my intuition was telling me. The biggest one was, get out of the relationship that you're in. It's terrible. Yeah. Stop doing this to yourself. And so it was almost like I was reading a letter from like a really amazing fairy godmother or something like that.
Yeah.
You know? It's weird. And I love having it now because I journaled a lot on a computer too. Like when I was too afraid of people finding it and I was like, I need to password protect this. But I love now, years and years later, watching the progression of my own growth.
Yeah.
That was pretty amazing. I don't know if you've seen that too in your own journaling.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And people ask me a lot, you know, what do you do with the journals after? Do you think you should read them again? Blah, blah, blah. And, you know, I think it's different for everyone. Mm-hmm. I will say that recently I've gone back and read some of my old journals from even just like a year ago or 2 years ago. And it's crazy to me to be like, wow, I don't think that way anymore, or I've improved so much. And to see that growth is really beautiful. But I think also, you know, there's something I tell people, and this goes back to what you were saying before about not journaling every day. Like, I don't journal every day. I journal, you know, as much as I can, as much as sometimes I feel pregnant with like something that needs to come out of me that I just have to like get out of me. And that I kind of call SOS journaling. And I think it's good to do like maintenance journaling as well, which is like, you know, a more regular practice with it. I think it's all good. But, you know, as women and people in general, but especially women, let's be real, we have so many shoulds and like obligations and things, especially in like personal growth. Anyone who's listening to this probably is like, I gotta meditate now and I'm supposed to exercise. And yeah, like Jesus, like it's like so much stuff. So I am not here to add another thing to your list. Like, just know that. However, I think this practice is so beneficial and so crucial. And the coolest thing about it for me is that it forces you to be present. You know, you really can't be like most other things in our lives. You can listen to a podcast and, you know, watch the dishes and also, you know, be talking to someone else. And you can also be like multitasking, which, you know, that's fine, whatever. I think mindfulness is great and all, but I multitask a bunch as well. But I think with journaling, there's something about the presence that it forces you into, which is really, you know, unparalleled to any other wellness activity for me, even, you know, meditation or yoga. Like, there's something about this that you have to be so present with your feelings, and it doesn't always feel good. You know, it's kind of like exercise in that way where it's like, it feels good after, but there's no way to do it wrong except to write for someone else and not for yourself, and not be authentic and raw and real. And when you're doing that, you're putting the mirror up in your face of what you're actually feeling, what your actual emotions are. And like we were saying before, you know, we don't want to do that as humans. You know, we want to cope. We don't want to feel our feelings. We want to cope with them by, you know, eating over them or not eating over them, or being in relationships, you know, whatever over them, right? But journaling forces you to like put that mirror in your face and look at them. And once you do, once you let them out, once you process them in some way, the really cool thing, and I should have said this before when you asked about the benefits, is that you can really hear your intuition loud and clear through journaling. And that's something that's been my greatest gift from it. Is there's even a tool, I think it's one of the last tools, it's called, you know, like writing to God or your higher power or your intuition or whatever you want to call it. And, you know, it asks you some questions and you use different colored pens and whatever. And it is really a transformational tool, I guess, because it allows you to hear that inner dialogue voice so strong, and you can actually see what your intuition is trying to tell you just from letting out the raw, real thoughts, because you see these patterns of like, I'm unhappy about this, I'm unhappy about this, I'm unhappy about this. And you see that enough times, you'll be like, oh, well, here's a pattern. Obviously, this is how you change it, you know? And sometimes it's not that obvious, but it helps you sort through it, you know?
Yes, a million times yes. And that was my next question to you, actually, and you sort of already answered it, about finding and feeling emotions, because I know that I've done surveys on my audiences, and a lot of them have said that numbing is one of the behaviors that they do pretty regularly. It's like, we don't want to feel any of the feelings. And I know personally, and I talk about this a decent amount. I mean, I sort of even still kind of feel like I'm in the like adolescent stage of feeling my feelings. I think I'm past the infancy stage.
Me
that
too.
was like in 2011. I got sober And, you know, for me, here's what it looked like. Just a quick recap for anybody that doesn't know. So all through my 20s, late teens and through my 20s, I struggled on and off with an eating disorder. I was a severe codependent and a raging love addict. So those were my go-to behaviors of choice. I was emotionally numb and really emotionally illiterate. I grew up in a house where I was loved a lot. However, we didn't really talk about feelings, or there wasn't any vocabulary around it. So we didn't do that.
Yeah,
we left everything under the rug, hoping it would go away. And so that's what was modeled for me. That's what I learned. My parents did the best they could. I actually don't blame them at all. So then when everything fell apart when I was around 31, I went and got help for those 3 addictions that I was telling you about. And I was all proud of myself and happy. And then I started drinking a lot. and, you know, that was through 2 pregnancies. I did not drink while I was pregnant, but, you know, as soon as those babies were out, I was back up on it. So when I got sober when I was 2011, I was like grasping at something. I'm like, you mean I felt naked and raw? Like all the feelings came up, and I was 37 when I got sober, 36 or 37. It was a lot. It was, you know, 3.5 decades of feelings coming up to the surface. And so I know all that to say, I know how to numb. Like I've got that down to a science. And what's also interesting is that I have just realized within the last few months that I can even numb my feelings without having any kind of substance, like, you know, without working too much or drinking or eating or any of it. I can just do it. I can like shut it on and off, which is kind of scary. Yeah. So what that has to do with journaling for me is that also as a writer, I write for a living. So every time I would sit down to write, my first thought was, okay, what am I going to write for my blog? What am I going to write for my podcast? Is this going to go in the book? And so I had an epiphany where it was like, what if I just write for myself? So if anyone's listening, you're like a blogger or a writer where you put stuff out there, whether it's to your Facebook status or Twitter or, you know, a blog or a book, I think it is such a huge element of self-care to write for yourself. Mm-hmm. And what I do is I just like put on some Adele, like that will get the rivers flowing, and just write. And sometimes I start with the first sentence of, I don't even know where to start, and then just start going from there. That's actually a question I have for you is, what advice do you have for first time journalers? I mean, somebody that's never picked up a pen to quote unquote journal, where do they even start?
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, I'll answer that in a second, but your family situation and your like early life mirrors mine so much. It's crazy.
It's really common.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess it's really common. So maybe it's not that crazy, but anyway, I just really,
we're like twin souls, you and me, Katie.
Yeah. That's what I was trying to say. But yeah, I mean, I think that's the question I get the most often. And especially as writers, usually I get the opposite question, which is like, well, I'm not a writer. I wouldn't have anything to say. And for those people in that camp, you know, my answer is always, well, you know, you can do this type of journaling because it's innate to all of us. It's simply writing as we speak. You know, if you can send a text message, you can journal. If you can write an email, you can journal. If you can speak, you can journal. So that's that. But then on the other end of things, for people who are writers or have to do a lot of writing in their work, they usually say to me, like, I already write, like, I don't want to do more writing. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's an interesting thing because the writing that you do for yourself can just be for yourself. And I think that's important that when you go into it, you're not attached to it being for someone else, that you really are writing raw and real. However, I'll find that every once in a while, I never make this my intention, but every once in a while, there will be something in there that is a gem that becomes a blog post or an idea or something I talk about on my podcast, or a conversation I need to have with someone, right? So every once in a while, there is a gem in there that does become repurposed and used, but I never go into it with that intention, you know, because I think if I do, it will change the work. It'll become something else. It'll become writing and it won't become journaling. Exactly. So I think that that's important, but knowing that, you know, it does happen. It's not uncommon. So it will improve your writing by journaling, I think, for sure. So that's that. And as far as, you know, getting started, you said it right there. It's one of those things that you just have to start. That's, you know, there's this great Yogi Bhajan quote, and he says, when the time is on, you start and the pressure will be off. And, you know, we've all felt that way, or I definitely have felt that way when I have like a to-do list a mile long and I'm really overwhelmed. Sometimes if I just, you know, eat the frog or whatever they call it, and I just like get 2 things done, I'm like, I feel better. Like I still have 20 more, but I feel better because I just started, and that momentum will carry you. So I think just trying. And there's this great, Kurt Vonnegut quote that I say like all the time because I love it so much, and it's definitely in the book somewhere. But he says, "We are what we pretend to be. So be careful what you pretend to be." And I don't really know how he meant it, but what I take from that is you're going to feel like you're a fraud. You're going to feel like you're pretending to journal. I feel that way when I start anything new, like I'm trying to play the ukulele and I'm trying to like do lots of things and I'm like really bad at them. And I feel like a fraud and I feel like I'm pretending, and because it's new for me, but I'm going to keep going because I eventually, and I know this has happened with other things, I felt like I was pretending to podcast for years, but then I was like, oh, I think I actually am a podcaster now, and we are what we pretend to be. So just pretend to journal and eventually you will be, there's no wrong way to do it other than to do it for someone else. So just do it for yourself, get started with it. And, as far as like sitting down and a lot of people have worry around the fact of like, well, if I sit down, I just won't have anything to say. Well, first of all, I have a book for you. I literally wrote the book because people were giving me like so much resistance.
So
that's why I wrote
girls.
the book. Yeah. However, like for people who might not have the book yet or, whatever, it's just as simple as asking yourself a good question and you'll get a good answer. So if you ask yourself a good question, that self-inquiry can let your intuition come forth and bring you like a really great answer. So, if you ask a question like framed really negatively, right? Like, why is everything so terrible? Then your intuition and your mind will seek out evidence to support why things are so terrible and give you a really great answer for that. Mm-hmm. But if you reframe the question to say, how can things improve from my current situation? You'll seek out evidence in the other direction. So it's about, asking a productive question. I don't think that journaling should be super positive all the time because I don't think that that's how life is. And I think it's important to go into it with that kind of a mindset. And like we were talking about so much throughout this interview, that it is really cathartic to let out those raw, real thoughts. But it's not super productive to stay in that. Just like I was starting to say before about, reading the old journals, I think it's cool to see your growth. However, I don't think reading my old negative thoughts is like that productive for me. So I don't really do it. A lot of times I journal and I just throw it away. Sometimes it can be triggering or it can take you out or it can just not be that productive. So I think it's about, knowing yourself and being honest with yourself. And like, you're all smart ass kickers here. So like, we all know what is good for us. And it's about just being honest with that and doing that and knowing if you feel like you're journaling and you feel like, oh, I'm writing this to like try to make my words really pretty for someone else, like just pivot and go back to another way. Or I'm staying in the negative and I'm just stewing here. Like I've let out enough. How can I write about how I can improve this and really, coach yourself through that? And I find that, if I do a really like free-formed journaling where, I don't know, are you familiar with the Artist Way and morning pages?
The morning pages. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So like if I'm doing something like that, then I find that I really do start to self-soothe as I go down the page. And I don't even try to. Mm-hmm. So I think it becomes more innate to do that. And my book, has tools in all different areas to guide you, through all these things. There's tools from like getting organized. There's tools about body image and decluttering and like everything you could ever want a tool for. But I think the best tool and spoiler alert, the final tool is a tool to help you create, custom tools for yourself, which is all about asking good questions, getting good answers.
Wow. Okay. So just real quick for anyone listening, we kind of ran over the Artist Way. And so all the links and resources are going to be at yourkickasslife.com/109. There will, of course, be links to Katie's book and her podcast and any other resources we mentioned here. But I love, and you said, I just wanted to go back and like highlight that you said, get honest with yourself. I have my only tattoo right now is to thine own self be true. It is tattooed on my foot because I think that really like my entire life changed the minute I got honest with myself. And more specifically for me, what that meant was like looking at what I needed to take responsibility for. Like, what was I tolerating? It's like, so for anybody who's like, my life is so terrible and you want to journal about that, like, what is your part in it? Like, and I'm not a huge fan of like shine the light on what are you tolerating that you have a choice about? Because I mean, I don't know about y'all, but I was a blamer. By the way, chapter about that in my book too. It's like, if everyone else would just change, my life would be so much better.
Oh my gosh,
like,
yeah.
That's you, like, write about that. Like, what do you want? And that's what's important to go look back on, because the thoughts are already like running around like crazy in your head in a hamster wheel. Get them out on paper.
Yeah.
Shine a light.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. You're so cool.
I'm about to get mad up in here and drop the mic and get sweaty.
No, you're like the coolest. I'm so glad I'm talking to you right now.
It's one of those things where it's like, I just know it was so incredibly humbling and made me a little angry at myself that I just was like, it was sort of one of those things where you get to a point in the road where both outcomes suck. So it's like, oh, okay, I continue with tolerating everything that's going on in my life, i.e. relationships and people that won't act the way I want them to, or I walk away from them. Both of those suck. So which one sucks worse? And for me, like, I came to that realization and stayed for a long time and was like, well, the staying sucks a little bit less, so I'm going to do that. And then personally, the choice was made for me, and I don't know if I would still be in a lot of the situations I was in before. I think that journaling, oh God, I look back at my journals and I'm just like, wow, like the shit I was putting up with. It just, like, so get it out on paper. I wish that I would have done it more. I wish that I would have journaled more. And there's so much to be learned. You know, that whole, like, hindsight's 20/20. Mm-hmm. So it's true, like, journaling will show you that. Journaling will show you your hindsight, and sometimes you may still be in it. So you can see.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it really did for me originally. You know, I think I was able to have that friend, that support, that, you know, have you ever just, like, I'm sure, like, this probably happens with Amy for you, like, you are on the phone with a friend and you just share, you just let it out, right? You just, like, share all of, you know, maybe a specific situation. I just did this with one of my close friends yesterday. And
then you solve your own problem? Is that what you're going to say?
Yeah, or you hang up the phone and you just feel relief by, like, sharing it with someone.
Yeah.
And journaling is like a mini version of that with yourself. Mm-hmm. And it sounds so elementary, or it sounds so silly even, but for whatever reason, getting it out of your head onto paper is so cathartic and really is life-changing for me. And I'm not even, like, trying to be dramatic with that. Like, it really helped me so much. And I didn't really think that it would. And then when I was researching the book, I found a couple studies that actually show, it was a study about expressive writing, which is essentially journaling. It's like writing about your feelings and how it improved people's happiness. And I was like, there we go. Like, I did this for myself. Yeah. And so it really surprised me. But
I totally believe it. Well, and I want to point out too, and I think that I'm very lucky and blessed and, you know, privileged as well. I know that, but in the realm of my friends, and that I've worked really hard, but I'm very lucky to have people that I can share my stories, and that pain and those stories can bear the weight of that. I have been in friendships where that was not the case. And so I know that a lot of people listening don't have that friend or friends where they can come to and show all of their things that they deem like the not pretty side of them. Mm-hmm. So I think that for those of you listening that don't have that person, they don't have their Amy in their life, that start with a journal, start just getting really honest with yourself. And I'm sure that your book has like prompts and things like powerful questions to ask themselves if you're like,
yeah, it's all prompts.
Yeah. Yes. And you don't need that
55.
many. Yeah. You don't need that many powerful questions. So go to yourkickasslife.com/109. I have one more question for you, Katie, before we wrap it up. It's a question I ask all of my guests. And that question is, what surprises you about the work you do with women?
Oh, it's so good. I think, you know, what surprises me with women is how similar we all are. I think, you know, we kind of had a moment of that earlier today. I think so often I've felt like I'm the only one who feels this way. Mm-hmm. And then as soon as I vulnerably share, it's like, oh, wow, there's a bunch of other people who feel this way. And every time I'm on a mentoring call with one of the girls that I work with and she shares something with me and I'm like, oh my God, I totally did that. Because of course you attract people who have had similar experiences to you. And I'll have like the perfect, because I've come out the other end of it, I'll have the perfect, you know, I coach from my experience. I have the perfect, you know, anecdote for them, and they're like, what? I'm not alone? That I wasn't the only one who felt that way? And they're so shocked by it. And I'm like, no, you're not. And it sometimes still surprises me that that is the case, you know, that we all are so similar and the human experience is so similar. Of course, we have like unique things, but I think the way that we genuinely feel is that we're alone. And what I really hope my work does, I'm not an expert. I'm just a journaling enthusiast. I don't claim to be an expert in anything. I'm just still learning, but I'm just growing up online and sharing my experiences online in this really truthful, authentic way, and hoping that that makes people feel less alone, because me sharing makes me feel less alone. So I think that's the thing we all really want, is to feel like we're not the only one going through this, and to have support and just not be alone.
I love that. It's so true. And Kristen Neff is a researcher in Texas, and she studies a lot about self-kindness and self-compassion. And that's one of the elements, is that piece of common humanity, and just being kind to yourself on the path of knowing that you're not the only one. And that's so important. So I'm glad you said that. Thank you so much for being here. And tell everyone,
thank you.
They can go to yourkickasslife.com/109, but if they want to go directly, where can someone pick up a copy of your book? Easy peasy.
It's at Barnes & Noble or their local bookstore, or, of course, on Amazon. There's a link to it on my website, of course, on your website. Yeah, so, anywhere that books are sold. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I love this book. I love talking about this work. I love the work you do. So anyone who is a friend of Andrea's is a friend of mine. Yeah, check out my website and my podcast, too. Andrea's going to be on as a guest soon, too, and really psyched that I was here.
Well, thank you so much. And everyone, thank you again so much for listening. And until next time, we will see you all out in cyberspace. Bye-bye.
Bye.